It was the final lap of the race in the crowded stadium, and the drivers were pushing their cars to the limit. As they hurtled around the track, the roar of the engines drowned out all other sounds. Suddenly, one driver saw something out of the corner of his eye, a small child walking across the track. He hit the brakes hard, causing his car to skid to a stop just inches from the child. The other drivers swerved around him, narrowly avoiding a pile-up. The driver jumped out of his car and ran to the child, but when he got there, he realized that there was no one there. Confused and scared, he looked around, but no one else had seen the child. The race officials came over to investigate what had happened, but they found no evidence of a child or anyone else on the track. The other drivers thought the driver who had stopped was crazy, and the audience was unaware of what had just happened. The driver who had seen the child was left with a haunting feeling that he had encountered something supernatural. He tried to brush it off and focus on the race, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. In the next race, the driver attempted to put the previous race behind him. He sped down the track with fervor, and although he managed to secure second place, he realized on the final lap that the car ahead of him was unreachable no matter how fast he went. Upon crossing the finish line, he felt as though he had come very close to victory. However, as his team members rushed toward him, cheering and yelling, he was bewildered by their ecstatic behavior. "We did it!" his team members exclaimed, lifting him up in the air. "I'm in second place, aren't I?" the driver questioned, perplexed. His team members laughed, believing he was making a joke, and continued their celebration. However, upon glancing at the scoreboard, the driver discovered that he was, in fact, in first place. The driver wondered what car was ahead of him. Then, a sudden realization dawned upon him. He remembered the distinctive paintings that had been painted around the leading car as he had followed it. Amongst those paintings was a picture of a child, the very same child he had seen walking across the track in the previous race.
Once upon a time, in a small village, there was a bookshelf that stood in the corner of an old house. The bookshelf had been there for as long as anyone could remember, and no one knew where it came from or who had put it there. Despite its ordinary appearance, there was something strange about the bookshelf. Everything that was placed on it, no matter what it was, always seemed to be missing a part of it. For example, if someone placed a stack of papers on the bookshelf, several pages would always go missing. If someone placed a cup on the shelf, it would always be missing a handle when they retrieved it. Initially, the villagers dismissed the odd occurrences as mere pranks, assuming that someone was deliberately causing mischief. However, as time passed, they observed that people were becoming increasingly wary of the bookshelf, and it became clear that it was not just a matter of harmless pranks. There was an unexplained malevolence at play. Whenever anyone placed anything on the bookshelf, they would discover that critical parts or pieces had vanished without a trace, leaving them feeling disconcerted and terrified. Amidst this, there was a young girl named Lisa who was born with a large, ugly birthmark on her face. The village kids did not like her because of her appearance, so she always played by herself. But Lisa was a curious child, and one day she decided to investigate the bookshelf. She placed a small toy on the shelf and waited. After a few minutes, she returned to find that the toy was missing one of its arms. Despite being frightened, she refused to give up and kept a watchful eye on the bookshelf, hoping to catch a glimpse of whatever was causing the strange phenomenon. That night, Lisa sneaked into the house and placed another toy on the bookshelf, then hid behind a nearby chair, watching the bookshelf intently. After several minutes, nothing moved. She yawned and started to feel tired, but suddenly, she saw a tiny ball appear from the top of the shelf. It was dark, round, and rolling. It rolled down to be next to the toy. When the ball touched the toy's leg disappeared. Then, the tiny ball rolled upward, back to the top of the bookshelf, and vanished. Filled with curiosity, Lisa stood up and ran to the bookshelf, attempting to get a closer look at the tiny black ball. However, the bookshelf was too high, so she began to climb it. When she reached the top, the shelf was at her eye level. Her eyes darted left and right, searching for the tiny black ball on top of the bookshelf, but there was nothing there. While she was in disbelief, suddenly, the tiny black ball appeared right in front of her eyes and charged towards her, hitting her forehead hard. Shocked, she fell off the tall bookshelf and lost consciousness. The next day, Lisa woke up next to the bookshelf. She stood up and walked to the washroom to wash her face with water. As she saw her reflection in the water, she was amazed. The large, ugly birthmark on her face was gone. Her face was now very beautiful. She knew the tiny black ball had removed the birthmark from her face.
Tom was always up for a good prank, and his latest idea was to send out threatening emails to random people. He would use a fake email address and a different name each time, so no one could trace it back to him. It started out harmless enough, with Tom sending out messages like, "I know what you did, and I'm coming for you." But as the days went on, he started to escalate his messages, making them more and more ominous. One day, Tom received a reply from one of the people he had targeted. It read, "I know who you are, and I'm going to make sure you regret ever sending that message." Tom laughed it off, thinking it was just someone trying to scare him back. But then he received a call from the local police department, asking him to come in for questioning. It turned out that one of the people Tom had targeted was a high-ranking government official, and they had taken the threats very seriously. The police had traced the emails back to Tom's computer, and were now investigating him for making terrorist threats. Tom was in shock. He had never meant to hurt anyone, he was just playing a silly prank. But now he was facing serious consequences. As the news of his arrest spread, Tom's friends and family were stunned. They couldn't believe that the friendly, fun-loving guy they knew could have done something like this. One day, Tom received a note from an unknown source. It read, "I see the news about your situation, and I know that the high-ranking government official you targeted is actually doing something illegal, insider trading. Would you like to help me expose him?" Tom was skeptical at first, but the note contained specific detailed information. He agreed to help the anonymous writer expose the corrupt official. Tom went on national television and accused the official of insider trading. The official was furious and sued Tom for slander. During the trial, it was revealed that Tom's anonymous source was actually not reliable, and the insider trading allegations were unfounded. Tom was found guilty of both terrorist threats and slander, and was put in jail. A week later, Tom got a new cellmate, Jimmy. Tom asked Jimmy why he was in jail. Jimmy hesitantly confessed that he was the one who sent Tom the note about the official. He had intended it as a harmless prank, not thinking that Tom would actually act on it. Unfortunately for both of them, Tom's actions had serious consequences, and they were now sharing a cell. The police eventually found out that Jimmy was the one behind the prank and charged him with terrorist threats and slander as well. Tom and Jimmy were both in jail for their foolish actions, but at least they had each other for company.
The girl had always dreamed of performing on stage, and finally, her chance had come. She had practiced for months, perfecting every note and every nuance of her performance. As she sat at the piano, under the bright spotlight, she felt a thrill of excitement and anticipation course through her veins. The audience was entranced by her music, and the room was filled with a hushed, reverent silence. But suddenly, the peaceful atmosphere was shattered by the sound of pounding footsteps, as a man charged up onto the stage. He was holding a knife in one hand, and his eyes blazed with a fierce, desperate intensity. "Please, don't leave me," he cried, as he grabbed hold of the girl and pulled her close to him. "I love you so much, I can't bear to lose you." The girl tried to pull away, but the man's grip was too strong. She looked around desperately for help, but the audience was frozen in stunned silence. It was only when she saw the flashing blue lights of the police car outside that she dared to hope for rescue. The man continued to rant and rave, his grip on the girl's arm tightening by the second. People in the audience started to call out, trying to reason with him, to talk him down from his mania. But it was no use, he was too far gone, too consumed by his fear and his desperation. Just as it seemed that the man was about to do something truly terrible, something miraculous happened. A piano chair, which had been precariously balanced high above the stage, suddenly fell and struck the man on the head. The impact was enough to knock him out cold. The girl was dazed and disoriented, but the police officers quickly arrived on the scene, taking control of the situation and ensuring that the man was safely detained. It was only later, during the investigation, that they discovered the true reason behind the man's outburst. It turned out that he had been involved in a long-term, tumultuous relationship with the girl and had been unable to come to terms with her decision to break things off. In a desperate attempt to win her back, he had planned to stage a dramatic confrontation at her concert, hoping to appeal to her emotions and persuade her to give him another chance. But he had reckoned without the actions of another man, one who had also been consumed by jealousy and anger at the girl's rejection. This man had rigged a piano chair to fall on stage during her performance, hoping to scare her and humiliate her in front of her fans. In the end, both men were thwarted by the unpredictable twists of fate. The first man, the one who had charged onto the stage with a knife in his hand, was knocked out cold by the piano chair that had been meant for someone else. And the second man, the one who had hoped to humiliate the girl with the falling chair, was caught by the police and charged with attempted assault.
Once upon a time, there was an inventor who had just created a remarkable invention, a pair of flying shoes. When worn, the shoes would lift the wearer up into the air, allowing them to fly around with ease. Excited to share his invention with the world, the inventor held a press conference and even showed his invention on TV. However, the inventor's press conference caught the attention of a notorious thief who was always on the lookout for his next heist. When the thief saw the flying shoes on TV, he knew he had to have them for himself. So one night, he snuck into the inventor's house and found the pair of flying shoes. Without hesitation, he put them on and took off into the night sky. What the thief didn't know was that he had actually stolen the prototype of the flying shoes, which wasn't working perfectly. The prototype had a tendency to malfunction, causing the shoes to shake uncontrollably and even explode at times. The following night, the thief decided to use the shoes to steal some valuable gold from an old lady's collection. The lady lived on the 10th floor of a building, so the thief put on the shoes and flew towards the building. But just as he was about to reach the 10th floor balcony, the prototype shoes malfunctioned and started shaking violently. They went up and down, causing the thief to panic. Eventually, the shoes exploded in midair. Fortunately, the thief managed to remove the shoes just in time and jumped onto the 8th floor balcony before they exploded. However, now he was stuck on the balcony with no way out, so he had no choice but to break into the 8th floor apartment. Once inside, he realized that nobody was home. As he searched the apartment for an escape route, he stumbled upon a safe. Using his skills, he was able to crack it open and found some shining stones inside. The thief was thrilled, thinking he had found a valuable treasure. He quickly pocketed the stones and left the building, feeling satisfied with his haul. But little did he know, the 8th floor apartment actually belonged to the inventor who had invented the flying shoes. The shining stones were the inventor's property, too. The stones contained the flying power that the inventor had used to create his flying shoes. As the thief walked home with the shining stones, he suddenly felt a strange sensation. The stones started to fly up into the air, taking the thief with them until they disappeared into the night sky.
Barbie has a colleague named Carlos in the office. Carlos regularly takes a 15-minute break, leaving his desk for a short while. Barbie and other coworkers assume he goes out for a quick smoke because they know he is a smoker. However, on a couple of occasions when Barbie needed to speak with Carlos, she went out to look for him but couldn't find him in the smoking area. She searched around the building but still couldn't locate him. This occurred a few times, leading Barbie to believe that Carlos is not using his break for smoking. He must be doing something else. One day, when Carlos left for his break, Barbie decided to follow him. Carlos went up 2 floors using the stairs and then walked all the way to another set of stairs in the building, taking them down 4 floors before returning to the first set and going up 4 floors. Barbie was perplexed and decided to confront him about it. She asked him why he was walking up and down the stairs. Carlos revealed that he found out smoking was bad for his health, so he quit and started using his break to walk up and down the stairs for exercise. He also mentioned that he wanted to adopt a healthy lifestyle. The story did not end there. Barbie decided to take the stairs instead of the elevator one day, inspired by Carlos. As she climbed, she heard someone else walking upstairs and thought it might be Carlos. She looked down and saw Carlos on the floor below, suspiciously checking to see if anyone was around. Barbie moved away from the edge of the stairs to avoid being seen by him. She peeked down to the lower floor and saw Carlos making a hand gesture. Suddenly, a black hole appeared out of nowhere, and Carlos stepped inside it and disappeared. The black hole vanished immediately after. Barbie was shocked and ran back to the office to tell her colleagues what she had seen, but she found out that Carlos had quit that morning. She ended up not telling anyone about what she saw. Nobody ever saw Carlos again, and Barbie did some research online and concluded that Carlos was probably a time traveler.
In the heart of a city, there stood an old intersection, which was infamous for its high number of car accidents. Despite the constant efforts of the traffic engineering department, they couldn't figure out why the intersection was so dangerous. Little did they know that an evil traffic light was the cause of all the chaos. The traffic light was old and worn out, and its lenses had turned a deep shade of red. But it was more than just a neglected piece of infrastructure, it had developed a malicious streak. The traffic light had become self-aware and enjoyed causing accidents by intentionally changing from red to green at the wrong time. Drivers would approach the intersection with caution, only to be thrown off guard by the traffic light's erratic behavior. Cars would collide, and people would get injured, but the traffic light would show no remorse. The traffic engineering department was stumped. They reviewed countless footage, checked the wiring, and conducted several tests, but they still couldn't find the reasons why there were so many car accidents in that intersection. The scary part of this story is how the incompetence of these traffic engineers resembles that of many of our government officials today. There are many issues today that are clearly caused by a small group of corrupt individuals. Despite conducting exhaustive surveys, running numerous tests, and compiling extensive research, government officials are still unable to identify the root cause of these problems. Even scarier, some officials are aware of the causes but have made no attempt to address them, while others have even participated in these corrupt activities.
I stood there frozen, my eyes locked on the shadowy figure standing outside my front door. It had been there for what felt like hours, but I couldn't be sure. All I knew was that it had been long enough for my fear to grow into a gnawing sense of dread. I tried to shake it off, to tell myself that it was just a stranger passing through, but the longer I stared, the more I realized that this person wasn't going anywhere. They just stood there, motionless, their face shrouded in the darkness. I knew I needed to do something. Call the police, maybe. But even as the thought crossed my mind, a shiver ran down my spine. What if the stranger heard me? What if they were waiting for me to make a move? I felt trapped, caught in a sick game of cat and mouse. The longer I hesitated, the more I felt the stranger's presence closing in on me. I could almost feel their breath on my neck, their eyes boring into the back of my head. I tried to stay calm, to tell myself that I was overreacting. But every time I looked back at the door, the stranger was still there, their silhouette a looming presence in the night. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. With shaking hands, I reached for the phone and dialed 911. My heart was pounding in my chest as I waited for someone to answer. 911, what's your emergency? The operator's voice crackled through the receiver. I think there's someone outside my house. I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper. Okay, stay calm. We're sending someone over right now. Can you give me your address? I rattled off my address, barely aware of what I was saying. All I could think about was the stranger outside my door, and the fear that had been building inside me for hours. When the police arrived, they found no sign of the stranger. But even as they assured me that everything was okay, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. That somewhere, out there in the darkness, the stranger was still waiting for me.
Once upon a time, there was a hand of bananas that grew on a small farm. They were peculiar bananas, for each one of them had a strong sense of hatred towards one another. They fought and squabbled constantly, but because they were all stuck together, they couldn't separate from each other. As time passed, the hand of bananas began to show signs of wears and tears. The outside became bruised and battered, while the inside became softer and softer. However, despite their deteriorating condition, the bananas continued to fight fiercely, each one blaming the others for their misfortunes. One day, a large farmer's head appeared in front of them. The farmer had come to check on the bananas, but upon seeing their condition, he knew that this hand of bananas was beyond saving. Without hesitation, he cut them down from the tree and threw them away. As the bananas lay on the ground, they finally realized the futility of their constant fighting. They had spent so much time and energy trying to tear each other apart that they had lost sight of what was truly important: their own survival. In their final moments, the bananas made amends and apologized to each other for their past behavior. They realized that their differences didn't matter in the grand scheme of things and that they were all just parts of a greater whole. As they faded away, the bananas finally found peace, no longer fighting against each other but instead working together in harmony. And though they were thrown away by the farmer, their legacy lived on, serving as a reminder that even the smallest parts of something can make a difference when they work together. Sadly, a group of birds appeared and started using their beaks to peck, eat, and swallow the bananas. All of them died brutally. It was a full moon night, and the sky was awash with a silver glow that cast an eerie light over the empty grassland. A lone camper had pitched his tent in the middle of the vast expanse, hoping to escape the hustle and bustle of city life and enjoy some quiet solitude. As the night wore on, the camper began to feel uneasy. The silence was deafening, and the howls of distant wolves made their skin crawl. They tried to shake off the feeling and get some rest, but it was impossible to ignore the strange energy that seemed to be permeating the air. As the moon rose higher in the sky, the camper heard rustling outside his tent. He tried to brush it off as just the wind, but the sound continued, getting louder and more persistent. Then, he heard the sound of footsteps, heavy and deliberate, circling his tent. The camper's heart raced with fear as he tried to stay as quiet as possible, hoping that whatever was outside would just go away. But then, he saw a shadow pass over the tent, blocking out the moonlight. Suddenly, the tent was ripped open from the outside, and a creature with glowing red eyes and sharp teeth stood before the camper. He screamed and scrambled out of the tent, running as fast as they could into the darkness. As he looked back, he saw the creature following him, its eyes glowing brighter and brighter in the darkness. The camper could feel its hot breath on his neck, and he knew he was in grave danger. But just as the creature was about to pounce, the camper stumbled and fell to the ground, turning to face his attacker. To his surprise, he saw that the creature was not a monster at all, but a werewolf, transformed by the power of the full moon. The camper watched in horror as the werewolf circled him, growling and baring its teeth. But then, as suddenly as it had attacked, the werewolf turned and disappeared into the night. The camper lay there, trembling and terrified, as he realized that he had narrowly escaped a fate worse than death. He packed up his things and left the empty grassland behind, vowing never to venture out into the wilderness alone on a full moon night again.